Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about labor force numbers. Stats Canada came out with its latest report today. We'll talk about Canada, Alberta, and then Calgary. But first, let's talk the national scene. 55,000 jobs in December were gained. That's up 886,000 year over year in Canada. The unemployment rate dipped slightly from 6.0% the previous month to 5.9%. What are your thoughts on the situation nationally when it comes to the labor market?
Well, those are it's a positive that we saw those kinds of job numbers, but they're not what I would consider to be a spectacular level of growth. This is it's a modest increase. The numbers that we saw were almost entirely in Ontario. I mean, we'll talk about Alberta in a second, and there was some job gains here as well. But about 46,000 of those 55,000 jobs were in Ontario. And that plus Alberta plus Saskatchewan was really the strength across the country. And so it's really pockets of activity that we're seeing across Canada that are driving overall national gains.
Okay, let's talk about Alberta. On a monthly basis, 11,100 jobs gained year over year, 129,800. The unemployment rate dipped from 7.6% to 7.3%. So good numbers for Alberta?
They're not bad. I mean, this is not again, similar to the national story, this isn't what you'd consider to be really spectacular or strong growth. It's steadily inching back to where we were pre-COVID. And so we're seeing, again, there's some pockets of strength. It was driven by some specific industries this time around. So we saw some pretty significant job gains in healthcare and social assistance. There are some additional oil and gas jobs, construction jobs, and accommodation food services jobs that are coming back. But as before, what we're still seeing here is that some of these industries, the more established ones that I mentioned just now, they've done pretty well so far. They've at least maintained the status quo, and we're still inching back in some of these hard-hit front-facing service industries. So there's, we saw a dip in wholesale and retail trade employment numbers, which through the Christmas season is not what you would have expected necessarily in those industries. And there's been And there were some accommodation jobs and food services jobs that did come back at that point in time. But the big question, of course, in all of this is that these are December numbers that were from a survey in the middle of the month, and so we were just starting to get worried about Omicron. It hadn't really hit in Alberta yet at that point. So, they're not bad job numbers. One of the silver linings there is that of those 11,000, there's actually 16,000 full-time jobs being created and 5,000 part-time lost. So that increase in full-time jobs is a solid number, but where we go from here is the big question.
Yeah, exactly. And let's look at it a little closer to home. The Calgary market in the Calgary region, 800 jobs gained, 12,700 year over year. Unemployment rate, though, increased slightly from 8.1% to 8.2%. What's happening in Calgary?
Well, Calgary was relatively flat, as you said. A lot of the job gains in Alberta last month had tended to be in the Edmonton area, which was a bit of an aberration from the last couple of months. And in Edmonton, it tended to be in the healthcare area. Yeah. So in Calgary, what we're seeing is a lot of those construction jobs that I mentioned earlier were created in the Calgary area. So a lot of this has to do with some construction activities, some major projects that are being built in the area, and more importantly than that, there's been an uptick in residential construction, and so we're seeing a lot of new building permitting activity taking place in the Calgary area specifically, and that's driving some of this construction employment that we're seeing.
Okay, so when you're looking into, we're just in the first week of the new year. What do you expect from the labor market going forward from both Calgary and Alberta?
Well, it's, you hate repeating the same thing month after month, but, COVID is the big story in all of this, and especially now more than ever. So we're seeing this huge surge in Omicron cases, and we haven't seen anything resembling the kinds of shutdowns that are going on in Quebec and to a somewhat lesser extent in Ontario. Whether we do that, I don't know. But whether there are additional shutdowns or restrictions on activity or not, it's still going to affect the employment numbers, because the more people that are sick, they're not going to be working. And so, that's going to be a challenge to make sure that businesses actually have the people they need to be able to function and operate at the capacity that they want to be able to do. So
Yeah.
that's a big cloud hanging over the job market numbers when we're looking ahead to what July is going to, or to what January is going to tell us.
When you look at this coming year, do you think we're going to start to see some ripple effect in the oil patch, in terms of job creation at some point this year, because the oil companies seem to be doing well right now?
I think we will to some degree, but it's not going to be like we'd seen in the past. So, ever since 2015, 2016, when companies were dealing with the aftermath of the oil price crash there, they became a lot more efficient. They started to automate more. They lowered their costs. They lowered the amount of labor that was required to be able to operate in the way that they currently do. And so the sector itself, the industry is doing well, and companies are doing well, and that will likely translate into some additional job growth. But we're not going to see it at the same rate as we had in the past. Where we are going to see that kind of job growth, I think, is going to be on the construction, some of these major projects that are going on in hydrogen development, in carbon capture, in chemical. And so those are obviously related to the energy sector very closely. But in that sort of traditional oil and gas sense, I don't think we're going to see those jobs. There'll be energy jobs, there'll be petroleum-based jobs, but they'll be in different areas than we had seen in the past.
All right, super. Thanks very much, Michael, for joining us today.
No problem.
All right, that was Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Alberta. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.